The second educational entrapment danger is education servitude. While the sidewalker deals with lifestyle servitude, the slowlaner wrestles with education servitude, freedom eroded by education that traps the victim to a job. Has your education indentured you to a job? Advanced degrees are not cheap. According to the College Board, the average college degree, including room and board, now costs nearly $60,000. Prefer the prestige of a private school? The tab will set you back a Ferrari. This kind of debt buries the dreams of your youth and puts them permanently bound to the slow lane or worse, the sidewalk. Consider the statistics. In 2007, the Washington Post reported that, according to Nellie Mae, the big student loan service provider, by the time college students are seniors, 56% of them will have 4 or more credit cards with an average balance of $2,864. According to a research report by demos-usa.org, a public policy research and advocacy organization, people in the 18 to 24 age bracket spend nearly 30% of their monthly income on debt repayment. This is double from 20 years ago. A survey of college borrowers found that the average college senior graduated with nearly $19,000 in student loan debts, and graduate degree pursuers more than $45,000. A 2007 Charles Schwab survey revealed that teenagers believe when they get older they will earn an average salary of $145,000. The reality? Adults with a college degree earned an average of $54,000. Unfortunately, the future isn't so bright that you have to wear shades. The truth behind reality and expectation is about a $100,000 chasm. This disparity might explain why the debts of our youth have exploded as they bridge their reality to expectation. If I can't make $145,000, I can look like I make $145,000. The best excuse people have for not having wealth is I don't have time. Well, why don't you have time? Because you have a job. Why do you have a job? Because you need one. Why do you need one? Because you have bills to pay. Why do you have bills to pay? Because you have debt. Why do you have debt? Oh yes, because you went to school for 6 years and have 6 figures in student loans. If you financed your advanced education with debt, the debt automatically becomes parasitic and traps you into forced job servitude, and that destroys freedom. While you might earn more, work is forced to stave off the debt. The debt is parasitic because it fails to free time and instead creates indentured time. Sadly, the parasitic debt is unforgiving and isn't sympathetic to the source. Whether you owe $35,000 for your awesome BMW or for student loans, debt steals freedom and forces indentured time. Chapter Summary: FastLane distinctions. A slowlaner's attempt to manipulate intrinsic value by education. Indentured time is time you spend earning a living. It is the opposite of free time. Parasitic debt is debt that creates indentured time and forces work. 14. The hypocrisy of the gurus. You've been duped. Suppose after college you're getting a bit pudgy around the middle and decide it's time to get back in shape. You enroll in a community college class called Healthy Nutrition, Eat Your Way to a Beautiful Body. On the first day of class, you arrive early, seat yourself, and anxiously await the class instructor. After a few minutes, an obese man walks into the room and waddles to the front of the class. You think, oh wow, he's fat, but he's here too. Change that, good for him. As the man profusely sweats while fumbling with a stack of papers, you glance at the student chair near the man and wonder if he can fit on it. He's twice the size of the chair. Then suddenly you're hit with the paradox. This isn't a student but the instructor. Are you freaking kidding me? How can this man effectively teach a class called Healthy Nutrition, Eat Your Way to a Beautiful Body, when he is not a model of his teaching? How can anyone take him seriously? Bewildered at the hypocrisy, you leave the class and head to the bursar's office, intent on getting a tuition refund. When it comes to gurus and financial advisors, this is what you must do: leave class and request a refund because they're guilty of a paradox of practice. The paradox of practice. The paradox of practice asks, do you practice what you preach? Are you a model, an exemplification of what you teach? Would you take skincare advice from a butterface? Would you take financial advice from a bankrupt bum? Would you take medical advice from a sanitation worker? Would you take bodybuilding advice from a 90 pounds weakling? The paradox of practice is a heated debate in my forum. Some feel it's perfectly acceptable to preach a strategy for wealth yet never use it. Do as I say, not as I do. A paradox of practice exists when someone promotes a money-making strategy, but that strategy is not what made him or her rich. In other words, they're not practitioners of their own advice. These people effectively teach one wealth equation, the slow lane, while they get rich leveraging another, the fast lane. When I see financial powerhouse Susie instructing people to dollar cost average their mutual fund portfolios, do I listen to her? Hell no. I laugh. When a Kramer advocates stock in Lehman Brothers because he says it's a good buy, do I listen? No way. I feel sorry for anyone who follows the investment advice of these people. I consider these people to be better entertainers than investment advisors. I have no love lost for the poor sap who lost his retirement savings because he listened to some CNBC pundit peddling some hot stock tip or investment advice. What is wrong with people? How do you not take responsibility for your financial plan? And then there's your uncle. You know, the guy, the well-educated elder in your life who knows everything, including the molecular structure of dark matter in the Horsehead Nebula. His army of factoids is always ready for deployment. Stock tips, the latest and greatest investments, money trends. Yet lest you forget, he lives paycheck to paycheck. I call these people broke know-it-alls, people who dispense financial, money-making advice and yet are dirt poor. These fat behemoths are walking hypocrisies on how to live a life of health and fitness. Listen to these folks with an entertainment expectation, not advice. Good advice comes from the guy who scores all the touchdowns, not the guy shut out in the fourth quarter. The best quarterbacking advice comes from Peyton Manning, not MJ DeMarco. Is a paradox of practice in play? In the game of money, money is the scorecard. If someone tells you how they scored, make sure they disclose their real method to wealth, not the illusion concealing the real culprit. Sadly, it's virtually impossible to get good, practical money advice because most gurus live a paradox of practice. Yes, gurus are rarely rich because of their advice, but rich because they're successful fastlaners who covertly hide their paradox of practice. These paradoxical metaphors described earlier befit the hypocrisy of the people who you've entrusted with your financial roadmap. You're sold blindly down the river by a ride they've never completed. Meanwhile, they gaze at you comfortably above in their corporate jet, drinking champagne. No one tells you the real, unadulterated story behind their road to wealth, but I will. The Slowlane roadmap is sanctimoniously trumpeted by best-selling book authors who dispense financial advice through TV, radio, and books. The strategies they sell are a travesty of grand illusions. Do you seriously think these people are rich from their preachings? Or are they selling you the slow lane while they get rich in the fast lane? Let me hypothesis about the probable wizardry behind their charade. First is a Susie. Susie preaches mutual funds, dollar cost averaging for 101 Burmese chats. We can absorb Susie in many media, radio, TV, and in any of her half-dozen books. Her grill is everywhere. She's the wretched Slowlane poster child, a high-volume producer of Slowlane junkets spewed to millions. So what's the problem? Ask yourself this: is Susie rich because she followed her own advice like municipal bonds, dollar cost averaging and 401 Burmese chats? The probable hypocrisy, the paradox of practice, is that Susie's method of creating wealth doesn't appear to be the road she travels, nor teaches. Is Susie Fastlane rich because she leverages the Fastlane roadmap while she pitches you the slow lane? Is she worth millions because she followed her own advice? Or because she sold millions of books? Is her wealth equation different from the one she teaches? Things that make you go. In a 2007 article, Susie was quoted as admitting to having the bulk of her wealth, an estimated $25 million, in bonds, primarily municipals. Additionally, she admits that only 4% of her wealth is tied up in the stock market because if I lose $1 million, personally I don't care. Wow, and yet, this is the vehicle you should entrust to build your wealth? How exactly did Miss Susie acquire that $25 million nest egg? Because of her advice which champions the stock market. Mutual funds, IRAs, bonds, and treasuries? Or did she use the Fastlane roadmap, amass wealth fast via explosive net income and then pour her wealth into these instruments? Yet, her advice for people at the precipice of poverty is that they should invest in the stock market to create wealth when it appears like she hasn't. Folks, the rich use the markets for income and wealth preservation, not to create it. Then there's David. As I thumbed through David's many books, I was inundated with an alarming quantity of Slowlane ilk, compound interest tables, save 10% of your paycheck, stop drinking expensive coffee, and other chronic Slowlane diatribes. Again, the paradox of practice rears its ugly mug. Did David get rich from his advice? Or from selling 11 books over and over several million times? Often regurgitating the same Slowlane sludge until you can't take it anymore? And finally, we have Robert, who hails from Hawaii and has two dads, one rich, one poor. Double Dad Robert bellicosely explains the real definition of assets and that sophisticated investors are deep into real estate. On national television, Robert once bragged about his Lamborghini, and I found this extravagant exposition ironic, yet disingenuous. Why? Isn't Robert showcasing the fruit of his teachings? Perhaps. Robert is a FastLane success story. He created and built a brand worth millions. But the curious question is this: which came first? The best-selling book or the Lamborghini? Is there a paradox of practice underneath? Did Robert have this status icon pre-book by leveraging his real estate teachings? Or did the Lamborghini arrive after selling millions of books? Robert has undoubtedly amassed a great deal of wealth selling books, games, and seminars. Is it possible you're being sold one wealth equation while the architect of the game uses another? Gurus fill a market need, and I don't deny it. However, consider this: are they being truthful about their paradox and their magic potion? Are they rich because of what they preach or what they sell? Once you're familiar with FastLane mathematics, it should become clear to you which gurus are likely guilty of the paradox. Is the underlying mathematical equation which governs their teachings the same one that made them rich? If the do as I say doesn't match the do as I do, you should be suspicious. What makes me different is this: the FastLane concepts in this book gave me financial independence. I already have financial freedom, the nice house, the sports cars, and the flashy wrapper credit card. I don't need this book to get me these things. I also confess this FastLane disclaimer: this book has the power to make me wealthier because it leverages the same wealth equation I teach you. In other words, the do as I say matches the do as I do. Slowlane gurus admit failure on a Slowlane financial radio show. A caller sought advice. In a few months, the recession destroyed more than 50% of her savings, which had taken her nearly 10 years to accumulate. The Slowlane guru's advice? A palliative: stick to the plan. Recommit. Rebuild. In other words, my crappy plan has failed you, has taken 11 years to fail you, yet stand by it. Hope the economy rebounds. Hope the economy never sees another recession. Hope, hope, and hope. And yes, please buy my newest book, Rebuild. Economic recessions expose the Slowlane as a risky fraud with lifetime ramifications. Since these gurus make their rich livelihood selling the Slowlane roadmap, they need you to believe it works. Their wealth comes from your belief. Despite the current recession's masterful expose, the Slowlane Illuminati will never admit that. Their strategy is woefully inept, and instead they have deviously recalibrated their message to conceal the truth. They continue to spew the same failed rhetoric by writing new books, with new titles and new platitudes. Titles like Rebuild Your Wealth, Start Over, Recommit,